In Yemen, no one would disagree that the country's 10-year period is the darkest in its modern history. The calendar of this grim decade began with the outbreak of armed conflict when the Ansar Allah Houthi group stormed the Yemeni capital Sana'a in September 2014. March 26, 2015 was one of the darkest days of the war when an international coalition led by Saudi Arabia and the UAE intervened. We don't need to listen to this calendar to hear the groaning on all its days. Even if there have been rare events that have created a glimmer of hope, such as the United Nations Human Rights Council's decision on September 29, 2017, to establish a team of international experts to monitor violations in Yemen and expose those responsible. However, it was not only rare, but was usually retracted later. 4 years later, the war had not stopped and may have intensified, but under pressure from Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the Human Rights Council failed to maintain the move, which was a promise from the world to Yemenis that the violations and abuses committed against them would not go unpunished. October 7, 2021 became one of those bad days for Yemenis. With the termination of the work of the only independent international and UN body that investigates and issues detailed reports on violations committed by all parties to the conflict, the world has completely failed the Yemeni people. 85 international human rights organizations commented that day. The conflict in Yemen is no more complicated than similar conflicts in different countries worldwide. In early 2015, as Yemen was sliding into the current war, the United Nations ranked Rwanda's capital, Kigali, as the most beautiful city in Africa. For 20 years, Rwanda has been one of the world's fastest growing and most successful economies. The story of this unique country begins in the 1960s. Rwanda achieved its independence from occupation and became a republic in the same year that a republic was established in the northern part of Yemen, and before South Yemen's independence and becoming a republic, it did not get to where it is today easily. In 1990, as Yemen was celebrating its unification, Rwanda was sliding toward a violent civil war with an ethnic nature. The conflict peaked in 3 years and was accompanied by the most horrific massacres. The war destroyed the political, social, and economic fabric of Rwanda, which was classified as a failed state after the entire infrastructure, from schools and hospitals to factories and government departments, was destroyed or looted. The government's administrative capacity collapsed, and civil servants were killed or fled into exile. Most of the population was displaced, fleeing to neighboring countries or internally displaced. The Rwandan war left a divided society that was deeply traumatized and citizens despairing. However, many realized that the only hope for building a functioning society lay in reconciliation. In the end, national unity and reconciliation were not an alternative solution for Rwandans, but the only option for survival. Similar to the Rwandan experience, ending the war and achieving sustainable peace in Yemen are possible at any time, but not in the 10-year climate of impunity. The Struggle for Justice report published by the Mwatana for Human Rights and Ceasefire Center for Civil Rights addresses the state of impunity and options for accountability for human rights violations in Yemen as a prelude to traditional justice and national reconciliation. The importance of accountability and the options available for pursuing criminal accountability for international crimes committed in Yemen in order to achieve justice and national reconciliation.
وتعد المساءلة مسألة ضرورية وملحة في سياق النزاعات المسلحة، ليس فقط لكونها تحقق الانتصاف للضحايا، ولكن لكونها تمثل ضمانة لعدم تكرار الانتهاكات، فهي تحد من مسألة الإفلات من العقاب وتشكل رادع حقيقي، كما أنها عملية محورية من عمليات العدالة الانتقالية، وبدون تحقيق مساءلة على نحو عادل ومنصف تصبح العمليات الأخرى للعدالة الانتقالية غير مجدية، وقد لا تفضي لتحقيق عدالة وسلام حقيقيين.
Collecting and preserving evidence is crucial to achieving justice. Otherwise, there is a risk that war criminals will enjoy a de facto pardon through the loss or destruction of evidence. Failure to bring the perpetrators of human rights violations to justice constitutes a denial of victims' rights to justice and redress. The denial of justice only fuels the next cycle of violence, a clear lesson from the previous experience in Yemen. After the 2011 uprising, former President Saleh and his government received a blanket amnesty and an immunity deal for crimes committed during more than 3 decades of his rule. Ultimately, this trade-off, in which supposed security was deemed more important than accountability, saw Saleh take up arms alongside the Houthi armed group Ansar Allah, igniting the devastating conflict that continues to this day. What is the best accountability option for Yemen?
وبالنظر إلى كون اليمن والدول البارزة المشتركة في النزاع اليمني ليست من الدول المصدقة على نظام روما الأساسي، وبالتالي ليس للمحكمة الجنائية الدولية ولاية مباشرة على الملف أو الحالة اليمنية، يصبح خيار المحكمة الجنائية الدولية خيارا معقدا للغاية، على الرغم من كونه الخيار الأمثل نظرا لعدة أسباب، من بينها حجم وجسامة الانتهاكات التي ارتكبت وطبيعة هذه الانتهاكات، وأيضا تعدد الأطراف الذين شاركوا في ارتكابها.
There is currently no international verification mechanism in place. After the Human Rights Council failed to renew the mandate of the GEE on October 7, 2021, the following months witnessed a sharp escalation in the conflict, with thousands of civilian casualties, both dead and wounded. Despite the April 2022 truce agreement and the subsequent reduction in military operations, indiscriminate ground attacks, attacks on health facilities and personnel, child recruitment, detention-related violations, landmine incidents, roadblocks, and city sieges continue to plague the people of Yemen. To ensure that Yemen's calendar does not remain bleak and to overcome the legacy of war, achieve sustainable peace, and build a conflict-free future for Yemen, there is no alternative to further fighting for justice by pushing for accountability and inclusive national reconciliation.